Every year, women across the United Kingdom are failed by the systems designed to protect them. Failed quietly, in courtrooms and police stations and hospitals where the harder questions never get asked. And sometimes they are failed in the most irreversible way possible, killed by the person who was supposed to love them. Sarah Henshaw was 31 years old when she was murdered. She was a mother to 2 daughters, a devoted child to her own mother Lorraine, and a good friend to the people lucky enough to have her in their lives. Friends described her as outgoing and fun-loving, with an infectious laugh. She had spent years trying to escape a man who wanted to control her, and she had, at last, found within herself the resolve to make that break permanent. That resolve, tragically, may have been what got her killed. This is Sarah's story, not simply the story of her death, though we will tell that in full because it deserves to be told, but the story of the warning signs that were visible for over a decade, the investigation that followed, and the justice that was eventually delivered in her name. If anything you hear today sounds familiar, in your own life or in someone else's, please reach out. This story does not have to keep repeating.
Are you ready for the darkest stories Britain has to offer? Introducing our new book, Unreal True Crime, British edition, 35 shocking true murder cases that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Available now on Amazon in paperback and Kindle, or grab your instant PDF download from our website. Links are in the description below. Don't miss out. Get your copy today. And now, let's continue with today's case.
It was 2012 when Sarah first introduced Darren Hall to her mother, Lorraine. Sarah was already a single mother to a young daughter and carried the kind of cautious optimism that comes from wanting things to be different this time. Lorraine was not so easily reassured. From the very beginning, she noticed things. The way Darren spoke over Sarah, the way he made decisions for her, the need he seemed to have to know where she was and who she was with at all times. This is what coercive control looks like in its early stages. It is rarely dramatic. It builds slowly, like water wearing down stone, until the person on the receiving end has been so thoroughly conditioned to accept it that they can no longer see it clearly. Coercive control has been a criminal offence under the Serious Crime Act 2015 in England and Wales, a recognition of what survivors and researchers had said for decades, that the most dangerous abusers are often not the ones who hit the hardest, but the ones who control the most completely. By 2016, Sarah was pregnant with Darren's child, their second daughter together. Whatever mask he had worn in the early years had by now come off entirely. The abuse had turned physical. During her pregnancy, Darren pushed Sarah in the stomach. She was taken to hospital to check on the baby. The baby was unharmed. But the act told Sarah, and told anyone paying attention, everything about who this man was. Sarah did not leave immediately. This is not a judgment. It is a reality we must understand if we are ever to prevent these deaths. Leaving an abusive relationship when you are pregnant, with one child already in the home and another on the way, and a partner who has worked systematically to isolate you, that is not a simple decision. It is one of the most dangerous transitions a person can attempt. The failure to leave is never the victim's fault. It is the result of circumstances deliberately engineered by the abuser. What is also worth noting is what did not happen during those years. No formal intervention, no legal consequence for the assault during pregnancy, no mechanism that forced Darren to reckon with the violence he had already committed. Abusers who face no consequences do not learn that their behavior is wrong. They learn that it is permitted. Around 2018, Sarah found the strength to end the relationship. She walked away, reclaimed her home in Ilkeston, Derbyshire, and began the work of rebuilding her life as a single mother to her 2 daughters. But one critical detail remained unresolved. Darren Hall still had a key to her house. The key was never returned. The locks were never changed. That key was not just a piece of metal. In the context of this relationship, it was a statement, a declaration that the separation was not truly final, not in Darren's mind. It was a mechanism for ongoing access, a way to maintain, in physical form, the power dynamic that Sarah had tried to end by leaving. Some form of contact continued in the years that followed, in part because they shared a daughter. Co-parenting with an abusive ex-partner is one of the most difficult situations imaginable. It provides an abuser with a legitimate excuse to remain present in their victim's life long after the relationship has officially ended. Then, in April 2022, Sarah's grandfather died at the age of 71. Grief has a way of clarifying things. In the aftermath of that loss, Sarah reaffirmed her decision, clearly and finally, to cut Darren out of her life entirely. She was drawing a definitive line. For most people, being told a relationship is truly over is painful, but eventually accepted. For a man like Darren Hall, whose sense of identity was built on his ability to dominate a specific woman, that line was something else entirely. It was a threat, a provocation, an intolerable challenge to his sense of control. The research on intimate partner homicide is consistent and unambiguous. The period following a victim's decision to permanently separate is statistically the most dangerous time in an abusive relationship. Darren Hall was not the kind of man who accepted losing control gracefully. June 20th, 2023, was a Tuesday. Sarah spent the earlier part of the day with a friend, an ordinary afternoon in Ilkeston. She was last seen on CCTV at around 9 p.m. in the area of her home on Norman Street. That footage would later become the last known public image of her alive. She returned home that evening. Before 10 o'clock, the front door opened, not by her hand, but by Darren Hall's, using the key that had never been returned. Sarah did not want him there. A friend who was present confirmed to investigators that Sarah told Darren directly to leave. He refused. He sat down. He stayed. They ate dinner. They argued. The atmosphere in that house was heavy, the kind of loaded tension that anyone who has lived inside an abusive relationship will recognize. Sarah held herself together. She drove her friend home. Then she came back, alone, to her house, to him, waiting. At 10:02 p.m., Sarah exchanged messages with her best friend. At 10:09 p.m., she sent her final message. It was the last time she communicated with anyone who loved her. At 10:37 p.m., her best friend followed up, asking if everything was okay. The reply never came. Her best friend would spend the rest of that night, and the days that followed, in a state of growing, terrible certainty that something had gone wrong, the kind that starts as a nagging worry and builds, minute by minute, into the understanding that something irreversible has happened. She was right. But by the time that understanding hardened into action, Darren Hall had already had hours to work, hours to clean, to dispose, to drive, to return, to act as though nothing had happened. A neighbour living close to Sarah's home heard sounds that night she would not forget. From the direction of the bedroom came a loud bang, then sudden, complete silence, the kind that does not feel like peace. She sent a message to Sarah. She received a reply. The dog had suffered a seizure. Everything was fine. It was plausible enough to forestall immediate alarm. What she could not have known was that the message had not been sent by Sarah. Darren Hall was using Sarah's phone to manage the narrative, to buy himself time. In the early hours of June 21st, the neighbour was awake again. She looked outside. She saw Darren standing at the back of his van with the rear doors open. Then he closed them, got in, and drove away into the dark. What she had witnessed, though she had no way of knowing it, was the final stage of Darren Hall's attempt to make Sarah disappear. He was not a man in shock, paralysed by what he had done. He was methodical. He was moving. He was solving a problem. In the days that followed, Hall told people Sarah had simply left. He contacted her neighbour and said he didn't know where she had gone, that she had left early in the morning. When asked about Sarah's car still being parked outside, he offered no satisfying explanation. He later claimed some of her belongings were missing, an attempt to reinforce the fiction that she had gone away of her own accord. Our phones know more about us than we sometimes realise. Every Wi-Fi connection, every GPS coordinate, Every step recorded by a fitness application leaves a trace. That trace would prove fatal to Darren Hall's attempt to escape justice. At 1:50 a.m. on June 21st, Darren's phone connected to Sarah's home Wi-Fi, then to his van's GPS. The data shows him travelling north on the M1, exiting at junction 29, and stopping at a lay-by on the A617 toward Chesterfield. A quiet, remote stretch of road. The kind of place you only go to at 2 in the morning if you have a very specific reason to be there. What the data from the lay-by showed was even more revealing. Over approximately 9 minutes, Darren's phone torch was activated repeatedly. His health app recorded 266 steps, an unusually high level of activity for that hour, in stark contrast to his normal pattern of zero movement between midnight and 6 a.m. Someone was working in the dark, moving deliberately, doing something that required both light and effort. The digital deception extended further. The reassuring text sent from Sarah's phone to her concerned neighbour, claiming the dog had a seizure, had not been composed in panic. It required Darren to unlock her phone, write a message in her voice, and send it with the deliberate intention of delaying the alarm. This was not a man overwhelmed by grief. It was the same calculating intelligence that had managed and controlled Sarah throughout their relationship, now turned toward the problem of self-preservation. This detail matters beyond its legal significance. It tells us something about the kind of person Darren Hall was, and had always been. Even in the immediate aftermath of killing the mother of his child, his first instinct was not grief, not remorse, not shock. It was control. It was June 23rd, 3 full days after Sarah was last seen alive, before police were contacted with concerns about her welfare. Her car was still parked outside Norman Street. Her phone was switched off. To anyone who knew her, this was immediately alarming. Sarah was a devoted mother. She would not simply vanish and leave her daughters behind. Officers forced entry and found what they were looking for. Inside the flat, the signs were deeply troubling. A bucket, mop, and bleach. Evidence of urgent, deliberate cleaning. A broken necklace with an elephant charm that belonged to Sarah. 23 items were seized in total. Phones, a laptop, clothing, and a blue tarpaulin. Sarah's dressing gown and slippers were later found discarded in a nearby skip. Small, intimate items that tell their own quiet story. Hall was arrested on suspicion of murder on June 23rd. Phone data directed investigators to the A617 lay-by near M1 Junction 29. A specialist search team was deployed. In the undergrowth, just after midnight on June 26th, they found what remained of Sarah Henshaw, her body in an advanced state of decomposition, with fragments of blue tarpaulin nearby matching the one recovered from her home. The same tarpaulin, the same man, the same calculated cruelty. Initially, Hall denied everything, projecting the calm of a man who believed he had done enough to escape detection. But as the evidence accumulated, his story began to change. He offered a new account. Sarah had fallen down the stairs. It was an accident. He had panicked, and in that panic had made a series of terrible decisions, moving her body to a remote location, disposing of her belongings, sending messages from her phone to concerned friends, cleaning the scene with bleach, and returning to his normal life while her family feared the worst. It is worth examining how little this account holds together. Panic is real. But the behavior attributed to Hall was not irrational. It was sequential and deliberate. Driving to a specific remote location, bringing a tarpaulin, using a phone torch to work in darkness. Each step required a decision. Each decision required the suppression of panic in favor of calculation. Together, they describe not a frightened man who did not know what to do, but a methodical man who knew exactly what he was doing. His changing account reveals something about the kind of person Darren Hall was. First came flat denial, the defense of a man who believes he has covered his tracks. Then, when the evidence made denial untenable, came the accident narrative, the defense of a man recalibrating in real time. Neither response resembles the behavior of someone genuinely reckoning with the loss of a person they had loved. Both resemble the behavior of someone trying to win. The trial of Darren Hall opened on December 4th, 2023 at Derby Crown Court. It lasted approximately 2 weeks. The prosecution faced a genuine challenge. Because Sarah's body had been discovered in an advanced state of decomposition, pathologists could not establish a definitive cause of death. There were no clean forensic injuries to anchor the charge with absolute certainty. Court coverage, however, described evidence of neck bruising consistent in size with a dressing gown cord, detail the prosecution placed before the jury as part of its broader case. But the case did not rest on pathology alone. It rested on the totality. The phone data placing Hall at the scene and at the disposal site, the forensic match between the two pieces of tarpaulin, the neighbour who heard the loud bang and later saw Hall loading his van, the messages sent from Sarah's phone after her death, the cleaning materials, the broken necklace, the years of documented abuse that framed everything else. Each piece might be challenged in isolation. Together they were overwhelming. The jury returned a verdict of guilty to murder. Darren Hall, carpet fitter, ex-partner, convicted murderer, was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 17 years before any eligibility for parole. He is currently held at HMP Nottingham. For Sarah's family, the verdict was justice. Incomplete and inadequate in every way that truly matters, but justice nonetheless. The community rallied. Over £9,000 was raised for her funeral and to support her two daughters. Two girls who will grow up without their mother and who deserve to know that her death was not forgotten and that the man responsible is behind bars. To understand the Sarah Henshaw case fully, we must look beyond the facts of what happened and examine the psychological architecture beneath them. This was not a sudden or unpredictable act. It was the culmination of a decade-long pattern that researchers and clinicians in domestic abuse would recognize immediately as one of the most dangerous profiles in intimate partner violence. Darren Hall's behavior across the full timeline of this relationship is consistent with what psychologists classify as coercive, controlling violence, distinct from impulsive conflict that escalates on both sides. Coercive, controlling violence is characterized by its asymmetry. One partner systematically dominates, monitors, and subordinates the other. The motivation is not anger, it is power. The goal is not to win an argument, but to own another person. From Lorraine's earliest observations in 2012, to the physical assault during pregnancy in 2016, to the retention of the house key after separation, the thread is continuous. Darren Hall believed he had rights over Sarah Henshaw that she did not have the authority to revoke. His retention of the key after the relationship ended is psychologically significant beyond its practical implications. In abuser psychology, separation often triggers what researchers describe as an identity threat. The abuser's sense of self, constructed around dominance over their victim, is destabilized when that victim leaves. The key functioned as a psychological artifact, a physical object that allowed Hall to maintain, in his own mind, the fiction that his access to Sarah remained legitimate, that she had not truly gone, that she was still, in some essential sense, his. Sarah's growing resolve, particularly following her grandfather's death in 2022, maps directly onto what the literature calls separation assault. Research consistently shows that the risk of lethal violence escalates sharply when a victim moves toward permanent, definitive departure. The more clearly a victim communicates that it is truly over, the more the abuser's sense of control is threatened. For Darren Hall, Sarah's decision to fully disengage was not just rejection, it was an existential crisis. His response to that crisis was murder. The behavior that followed the killing, the methodical disposal of the body, the staged text messages, the bleached scene, the manufactured disappearance, is what forensic psychologists describe as instrumental post-offense behavior. These are not the actions of a man consumed by grief or guilt. They are the actions of a man whose dominant cognitive priority, in the immediate aftermath of killing, was self-preservation. The abuser and the killer were not two different people. This case also forces a systemic question with no comfortable answer. If the warning signs were present for over a decade, and they were, why was Sarah not better protected? Coercive control is extraordinarily difficult to prosecute. It leaves no clean forensic trace. It requires victims to reconstruct a pattern of behavior they have been conditioned to normalize. Sarah Henshaw's story is not only the story of one man's violence, it is a demand that we do better. For her, for her daughters, and for every woman still living inside a relationship like the one that killed her. Before we close, let's walk through the full story one more time, from beginning to end. 2012. Sarah introduces Darren Hall to her mother Lorraine, controlling behavior observed from the outset. 2016. Sarah is pregnant with their daughter. Hall physically assaults her during pregnancy, pushing her in the stomach. She is hospitalized. The relationship is now openly abusive. Around 2018, Sarah and Hall separate. She begins rebuilding her life as a single mother to her two daughters. Hall retains a key to her home. The locks are never changed. April 2022. Sarah's grandfather dies at 71. She reaffirms her decision to end all contact with Hall permanently. June 20th, 2023. Tuesday. Sarah spends the day with a friend and is last captured on CCTV at around 9 p.m. near her home. Hall lets himself in using his retained key. Sarah asks him to leave. He refuses. She drives her friend home and returns alone. Final message sent at 10:09 p.m. Her best friend's follow-up at 10:37 p.m. receives no reply. Night of 20 to 21. June 2023. Neighbor hears a loud bang from Sarah's home, then silence. She messages Sarah and receives a reply, sent by Hall from Sarah's phone, claiming the dog had a seizure. In the early hours, at 1:50 a.m., Hall's phone connects to Sarah's Wi-Fi and van GPS. Phone data records repeated torch activation and 266 steps at a lay-by off the A617 near M1 Junction 29. 21st to 23rd June 2023. Hall tells friends and family that Sarah has simply left. He returns to her home and disposes of her dressing gown and slippers, which are later found in a nearby skip. 23rd June 2023. Police contacted with concerns. Officers force entry and find cleaning materials, a broken elephant charm necklace, a blue tarpaulin, and 23 seized items. Hall is arrested on suspicion of murder. Just after midnight, June 26th, 2023. A body believed to be Sarah's is discovered in woodland at a lay-by off the A617, close to M1 Junction 29. Fragments